Stargate SG-1, the greatest sci-fi series nobody talks about anymore. I want to talk about a television series that ran for 10 seasons, spawned 2 spin-offs and multiple films, built one of the most intricate mythologies in science fiction history, and is somehow almost never mentioned in conversations about the greatest sci-fi ever made. Stargate SG. If you watched it, you know exactly what I mean. If you didn't, this video is for you, because you have missed something extraordinary, and I'm going to tell you why. And then I'm going to be honest with you about where it went wrong, because real fans don't pretend their favourite show never stumbled. Let's start at the beginning. The premise of Stargate is deceptively simple. An ancient network of ring-shaped devices exists across the galaxy. Step through one, and you emerge instantaneously on another world, light years away. The devices were built by an advanced race co-opted by a parasitic alien species called the Goa'uld, who used them to enslave populations across the galaxy, including thousands of years ago, ancient Earth. SG is the team that figures all of this out and spends the next several years using the gate to explore, make allies, and fight back. Simple enough, classic enough. The kind of premise that could have produced a perfectly competent adventure series and nothing more. What it actually produced was something far better than that. What made Stargate SG genuinely extraordinary in its prime was the combination of 3 things that almost never coexist in the same show. Mythological depth, sharp wit, and character chemistry so natural it felt less like acting and more like 4 people who genuinely wanted to spend time together. The mythology was the foundation. The Goa'uld were brilliant villains, not because they were terrifying in a straightforward sense, but because they were comprehensible. They were parasites who had elevated themselves to gods by exploiting more primitive civilizations. Their cruelty was coherent, their hierarchy was political, their technology was built on theft and stagnation rather than genuine advancement. They were empire as a concept, examined through a science fiction lens, and the show layered on top of that a genuine engagement with human mythology. The Goa'uld weren't just aliens, they were Ra, Apophis, Hathor, Sokar, Baal. The show used real mythological pantheons from ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, Norse legend, and more, and wove them into a single coherent alternative history of the galaxy. Done badly, this would have been gimmicky. Done the way SG did it in its prime, it gave every new villain an instant weight. You already knew who they were supposed to be, which made what they actually were even more interesting. The wit was what stopped all of that from becoming pompous. Stargate understood that you can take your mythology seriously without taking yourself seriously. The show had a lightness of touch, particularly in the character of Jack O'Neill, that allowed it to acknowledge its own absurdity without collapsing into parody. O'Neill's deadpan, his deliberate mispronunciations, his cheerful refusal to be impressed by anything, these weren't comic relief. They were a point of view, a way of saying we know this is strange and we're choosing to show up anyway. That balance is extraordinarily hard to maintain. Most shows that attempted it tipped too far in one direction or the other. Stargate held it remarkably for the better part of 8 seasons, and then it didn't. To understand what went wrong, you have to understand what the show was quietly losing, long before the quality visibly dropped. From as early as season 6, Richard Dean Anderson began scaling back his time on set. The birth of his daughter had shifted his priorities, and a career of physically demanding roles, including years as MacGyver before Stargate, had taken a serious toll on his body. The producers, to their credit, worked around him loyally. They promoted O'Neill to base commander in season 8, which kept Anderson on screen while dramatically reducing his filming commitments. But O'Neill wasn't just a character. He was the tonal anchor of the entire show. His particular deadpan held the balance between the series' genuine mythological ambition and its self-awareness. He made it look effortless. You only realise how much work he was doing when he's not there to do it. At the same time, the show lost General Hammond. Don S. Davis had played Hammond for 7 seasons, the institutional heart of Stargate Command. His departure after season 7 wasn't a creative decision. It was forced by serious health problems, including heart disease and diabetes, conditions that would eventually claim his life in 2008. The show did everything it could to keep him involved, and he continued to make guest appearances when his health permitted. But Hammond's presence had done something specific and irreplaceable. He connected SG's adventures to real consequences. Every mission briefing in his office reminded you that what these people were doing mattered beyond themselves, that there were chains of command, political pressures, moral weights that had to be carried. Without him, the show became slightly rootless, a team of heroes having adventures, rather than a team operating within a world that had its own gravity. 2 losses, both forced by circumstances beyond anyone's control, both deeply felt. Then came Season 9, and with it, the Ori. Cameron Mitchell arrived as the new SG field commander, energetic, capable, played with genuine commitment by Ben Browder. Vala Maldoran joined as a recurring presence, bringing genuine comedic chemistry, before becoming a full series regular in Season 10. Neither of them was the problem in isolation. The problem was that they were asked to fill a specific absence, O'Neill's wit, O'Neill's authority, by performing it consciously, rather than inhabiting it naturally. Mitchell felt like someone trying to fill a role. O'Neill never felt like he was filling anything, he simply was. And the Ori were the attempt to replace the Goa'uld as the show's central threat. On paper the concept was interesting. Ascended beings who demanded worship and punished heresy, a story about religious fundamentalism, about genuine power weaponized as faith. There was something worth exploring there. The execution didn't find it. The Goa'uld had taken 8 years to fully develop. Their mythology was deep, their individual personalities were distinct and memorable. Baal alone, charming, sadistic, darkly funny, could have carried several more seasons entirely on his own. The Goa'uld felt like a civilization. The Ori felt like a concept. Their human missionaries, the priors, were effectively interchangeable. There was no individual villain with enough presence to carry the weight the mythology required. Week after week, a prior arrived, threatened, performed miracles, and departed. The threat was real. The antagonists were not. And here is what makes this particularly interesting. At exactly the same time, Stargate Atlantis, the spin-off set in the Pegasus galaxy, introduced a new villain species called the Wraith. The Wraith were everything the Ori weren't, physically distinctive, internally coherent as a society, hive structures, queens, genuine hierarchies, political divisions the heroes could exploit. Individual Wraith had personalities. You could tell them apart. Some were cunning, some were brutal, some were almost sympathetic. They were frightening in a visceral way the Ori never quite managed. The Wraith proved the creative talent hadn't evaporated. It had simply moved sideways to Atlantis, which makes the Ori's failure even harder to understand in retrospect, and even more telling about what the original show had lost with the departure of the people who had built it. The films gave the franchise something it needed, a proper goodbye. The Arc of Truth resolved the Ori storyline with more clarity and satisfaction than the series had managed across 2 full seasons. And Continuum, which involved time travel, alternate timelines, and the glorious return of Baal to centre stage, felt like a love letter to what the show had been at its best. Sharp, mythologically rich, and genuinely fun, in the way that only something made by people who truly cared about it can be. They were imperfect, but they were honest. They remembered what the show was and tried to honour it. Poignantly, Continuum was Don S. Davis's final screen appearance. He died 1 month before the film was released. The Stargate writers paid tribute to him in the Atlantis finale, revealing that Hammond had died off-screen and that a ship had been renamed the George Hammond in his honour. It was the right goodbye for a character and an actor who deserved one. So where does that leave us? Stargate SG-1 at its best, the Goa'uld mythology in full flight, O'Neill's deadpan holding the whole thing together, Hammond's quiet authority grounding every mission, is some of the finest science fiction television ever made. Genuinely. Not in a nostalgic, rose-tinted way. In the way where you go back and watch it now, and it still works. The characters still breathe. The mythology still holds. The wit still lands. It lost its way. That's real, and worth saying clearly. Not because of creative failure, but because of human circumstances. Illness forced out a beloved actor. Family pulled another towards what mattered more. The show did what it could, for as long as it could, with what it had. None of that erases what it was. If you've never watched it, start with Season 1 and give it 4 episodes. If you watched it and drifted away around season 8 or 9, go back to the early seasons and remember what it felt like when everything was working. And if you've loved it since the beginning, you already know the gate is still out there and it still goes somewhere worth going. Next time, I'm going to make the case that modern science fiction is actually better than the classics, and I mean it. See you then.